Thank you, Laurie. We are so grateful for your support and dedication to Teachers College. And we are so excited to have all of you here, and we really hope that you leave feeling reinvigorated and inspired with new ideas. So let me tell you a little bit about the morning we have planned. Our first session is a distinguished group of elected officials who have helped pave the road, literally, to groundbreaking food policy, as we just heard from Laurie as well. They will describe the progress they have made while also pointing toward the evidence they seek from all of us to push their agendas forward. During the second session, titled, How Do We Know What Works?, we will delve into the emerging field of evaluating the impacts of community-based change programs with all the challenges of determining the outcomes of complex programs with multiple strategies that touch people's lives in so many different ways. Then we will hear about the inaugurative projects of the Laurie M. Tisch Illuminations Fund Healthy Food and Community Change Initiative. And finally, as Laurie just said as well, we are so honored to have Undersecretary of Food, Nutrition, and Consumer Affairs, Kevin Concanon, here. He oversees the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, or food stamps, and also had to oversee when we had disaster SNAP after Superstorm Sandy. He also oversees all the child nutrition programs, including school meals, WIC, and many others. Now, we all want communities where everyone of all ages reaches their full potential and enjoys life in full measure. There is no question that we all gain so much when all communities and all people enjoy access to healthy food. Children learn better, people stay active and vibrant as they age. We have productive workforce with more jobs, more economic growth, and we have stable and cohesive families. Yet, we all know that right now, residents of many neighborhoods don't have what they need for a healthy diet. They don't have access to healthy foods, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and low-fat dairy products. And they don't have access to information about preparing wholesome meals to counter all that misinformation about fast food and junk food so relentlessly marketed in those communities. There is one thing those neighborhoods do have: an overabundance of cheap, unhealthy foods. And make no mistake, this stuff is making a lot of people sick with diseases like type 2 diabetes and heart disease, decreasing quality of life, straining our families, and draining our healthcare system. But there is hope. Why? Because we have the collective means, the brains, and the will to become a healthier society, community by community. One crucial factor for moving forward towards health-promoting communities is for our elected officials to develop and enact policies that promote healthier eating choices, options, and habits. We recognize the challenges that elected officials face every day. They are lobbied aggressively by many different interest groups. They have to operate under tough fiscal constraints. People do not always agree about the right course of action, and far-reaching food policies can be put in the nice-to-have category. In short, getting policies that will help communities thrive is not easy. But access to healthy food is a right that all of our fellow citizens and families deserve, regardless of zip code. So, it is really essential we get food policy right. We are fortunate to have with us elected officials who have all been fighters and leaders in the uphill battle to enact smarter food policies for our communities. We look forward to hearing what they have done, what challenges they faced, and what evidence-based research and knowledge we can provide to help them bring good food policy to the table. When we were planning this event, we wanted a moderator who both understands nutrition and can engage others in thoughtful and challenging conversations. We found the ideal moderator in Dr. Madelyn Fernstrom. She is a nationally recognized expert as the diet and nutrition editor of NBC's Today Show. And she is also a professor of psychiatry, epidemiology, and surgery at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. So let's move on to the first panel.
So first we have Christine Quinn, who's Speaker of the New York City Council, and she creates policies and services that truly enhance the lives of every New Yorker. You may know she produced FoodWorks, the visionary and comprehensive food report and plan for New York City. Richard Gottfried is on our panel. He's not here yet and will be here soon, but he's a New York State Assembly member and chair of the Assembly Committee on Health and has been the leading fighter for health concerns in New York State for many decades. We have Scott Stringer, who's the Manhattan Borough president, who's well known for facing head-on some of our most enduring urban challenges. He's developed and advocated ambitious food policies, and his report, Food NYC, A Blueprint for a Sustainable Food System, has put food issues and opportunities into the spotlight. We have Mayor Cory Booker of Newark, New Jersey, and the trustee of Teachers College, who's working to make Newark into a city that nurtures and empowers individuals and families. So welcome our esteemed panel today. Okay, so panelists, we're going to have a little introductory statement from you, about 3 minutes or so. And first, I'd like to pose a question to Speaker Christine Quinn. So your initiative, the FoodWorks New York, is a long-term food policy plan for New York City. Can you tell us some of the most important aspects of this plan that gets food to developing communities where people get this access, and what kinds of results have you seen so far?
I think one of the most significant things about FoodWorks was, or is, the comprehensive nature of it. We say it was the first ground to garbage can look at our food system. And that's important because if you don't look at the food system holistically, you miss opportunities and you don't see the connections, and you look at just one parts of it and lose the power of all of it. So that to me is one of the most significant things. Two, within FoodWorks, we tried to think of things in a couple of different areas. One, how we could use the food system to reduce and end hunger. Two, how we could use the food system to improve health in our city, not just in the sense of obesity, but in how do we move our food around the city? How do we do that in a way that is less negative to our air quality? How do we do that in a way that's not causing such high asthma rates in the Bronx around the Hunts Point area? Three, how do we use food as an economic engine? Because of course the best way to end hunger is to make sure people have jobs in which they can buy enough food to sustain their families. So looking at this in those different ways, I think we've had a number of different successes. One, we are, and Scott's been terrific on this, as has the borough president of the Bronx, we are pushing very hard to make sure Hunts Point's lease is renewed, but when it gets renewed and expanded, it gets done in the right way. Two, we've been able to put zoning changes in place. The first time any city has ever used zoning to deal with the challenge of food deserts. Now, what that's done is bring a number of new supermarkets to neighborhoods that didn't have them, helped other supermarkets stay open and expanded. Now that's great because it brings food to a neighborhood. What else is good? It brings you a place you can use SNAP. What else is good? There's now people working in those supermarkets. Vast majority of them union supermarkets, so people are getting a good wage. That's kind of the way FoodWorks has tried to look at it in a much more connecting the dots kind of a way. And we've also been able to put in place programs for the first time that have actually expanded composting, a study to look at whether we could even do curbside composting someday, so we're not forgetting the garbage part of it either.
That's wonderful. So thanks for that succinct answer. We'll have a lot of room for discussion, as we go along.
Amen.
Now, our next question is for Manhattan Borough President Scott Stringer. You've been at the forefront of food policy issues here with your 2008 and 2009 food policy conferences and your 2010 Food NYC, A Blueprint for a Sustainable Food System. So how do you think we're doing at moving forward at a sustainable food system?
Well, I think thanks to the speaker's work and so many advocates, Laurie Tisches of the world, who are now making this a mission, I think we've certainly put a progressive food agenda on the table for New York. I guess I want to use my time just to sort of tell you why I became interested in food policy, because it wasn't particularly an issue I campaigned on or thought a lot about until I got elected borough president. And I said to myself, kid from Washington Heights now represents some of the wealthiest real estate in the world and some of the wealthiest people. And I wanted to figure out what I could do in some of our neighborhoods where people were really struggling. So we focused on El Barrio in East Harlem, and we thought that we could come up with a plan to reduce asthma, create a more healthy community. And my staff and I had a plan. So we learned a valuable lesson about our plan, because we basically showed up in East Harlem one day, new borough president, called the entire community together to announce my plan. That's true, and I had a plan.
It was good.
It was good. Yeah. It was good. Chris would have come. 8 people showed up to hear my plan. And I tell you this because it was a very awakening moment for me, that you can't go into communities that struggle with your plan.
Right.
So we went back, and instead of talking about my plan, we started to ask people what they wanted for a sustainable, healthy community. Right. You know what we learned? People didn't really trust the big hospitals. They wanted a place where they can go and test their kids for asthma and learn about mold and all these issues. So we worked with Mayor Bloomberg and the council and built a standalone asthma center. Wow. People said, how come we hear about green building development downtown,
Right.
but uptown, we don't ever hear about silver lead, gold lead on our development projects? So we called a conference of superintendents and developers and said, let's develop a protocol with the community. People in El Barrio said, we have no trees. Park Avenue downtown, lots of trees, uptown, not so much. So we worked with Bette Midler in the Parks Department and said, let's bring everyone together and start planting some trees around here. And finally, we said, in terms of healthy food, we've got to get to the store owners, the restaurateurs, who create these wonderful, wonderful community dishes in all different cultures and backgrounds. How can we bring them to the table and talk about healthy recipes and healthy eating? And then we brought everybody together and said, give me a recipe, whether it's an African restaurant or a Mexican restaurant, and let's figure out how we can work with health organizations to develop healthy recipes. And you know what happened? We got so many great recipes from people in public housing, the restaurants. We actually edited a cookbook called the Go Green East Harlem Cookbook, a bilingual cookbook, #1 best-selling cookbook in the country. No, it wasn't. It was okay. But check this out. Check this out. We gave out thousands of copies of this cookbook, and the best compliment we got about this was a love story, because we had pictures of the people in the community. The point I tell you is, if we're going to have a sustained food policy and we're going to really be able to lift people up health-wise, it cannot be top-down. Yes. We must get out to every community and make the case and involve people. And if we do this, then FoodWorks, Plan NYC, Food NYC, all of our larger discussion will actually resonate, because we understand the issue. We just have to get out to the communities, and that's why today's conference is so exciting. Thank you.
Exactly. Very well put. Thank you so much. Now we're going to have a chat with Mayor Cory Booker, who's invested in a number of initiatives in Newark to increase access to healthy foods. Now, you've gotten a lot of press recently and attention for going on the food stamp, the SNAP diet. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you've learned from that experience, and how do you think you might change food assistance programs based on your own personal experience?
Thank you. First, a quick 3 nods to 3 individuals. Christine Quinn's been a friend of mine for a long time. She's an extraordinary a leader, and I don't know if you all know her wife. Her wife is a Newarker, and we claim her. And so I'm going to do something. So I'm going to do something radical right now that would make headlines. But I am prepared right now, this moment, because I'm leaving office in 2014, to endorse Christine Quinn to be the mayor of Newark, New Jersey. She is my top. We look across the entire country. She is my top candidate for the job, if she will accept.
Kim would take me out in a second. Those Parker Street routes, neither one of us could beat them, Cory, but thank you.
And to the Manhattan Borough president on a very personal level, the best judge of a politician is not what you see in the public world. It's really what you see, what they do every single day, never makes a headline for their constituents. And I've had experience recently of engaging some people who reached out to him for help, and he was extraordinary, really bending over backwards to serve people. And to me, that's the mark of a great man, not when the lights are shining, but what they do behind the shades. And finally, today is Valentine's Day, so I want to profess a deep and abiding love for Laurie Tisch. She is an extraordinary extraordinary force for good, in both in my life, both in the city of Newark, and obviously we heard a lot about what's happening in Manhattan, but she is living the greatest call of the Greek love, agape, and to be of service every single day to other people in ways big and small, and she's helping to transform now through this initiative and her work in this area, thousands and thousands of lives. Just real quick for me, I got a call from the First Lady asking me to be her co-chair with Senator Frist of her Partnership for a Healthier America, and I really felt that it was her wanting to have a before and after picture, me being the before and Senator Frist being the after picture. But it was a great kick in the tuchus, as we say, as that Italian. That I should, number one, get my personal life in order, but also that we as a city should try to become a national model for innovations in this space. There is a crisis of profound proportion that's eating away, that's rotting the core of our country that we don't talk about. It should be daily headlines. It should be motivating all of us because the obesity rates, the type 2 diabetes rates amongst our children are epidemic, that we have families living in nutrition deserts, as we all know, but the impact that has on their economic productivity, on their educational life, on their cost of living is catastrophic. I live in one of our poor census tracts in the Northeast, and I see this every single day. And what bothers me is that these populations are often maligned in the press and in the most patronizing way that people really don't realize it. So on Twitter, I stumbled into an argument with someone and made them a challenge to go on food stamps, and it ended up becoming a national story, which for me was wonderful in the sense that it was a week that that reporters told me they thought the headline of the week was going to be a young lady who got pregnant, who happened to be a princess in England, and that this sort of stole the headlines from that very important news article. So it was, for me, on a personal level, for my team as a policy level, and on a larger way, it turned out to be a great experience. And it's working with Senator Stabenow's office, who saw immediately this was a great way to put some of these issues back in the headlines. So the quick, just a few points to make is, number one, there's horrible, horrible stereotypes about SNAP, misunderstandings about SNAP, who's on SNAP. 40% of SNAP recipients, more than that, are children. 20% or so are people that are disabled. Many of them are working households. The SNAP dollars takes a large percentage of SNAP recipients who are right below the poverty line, moves them above the poverty line, which I think is a meaningless federal line in this region where the cost of living is so high in the first place. SNAP funds, and I didn't even realize the gravity in my city alone, the tens of millions of dollars it brings into our local economy for everything from our bodegas to our grocery stores, creating jobs. I also, I lived for the last 15 years where most of my neighbors, or many of my neighbors, are on some type of assistance, and it even expanded my compassion. After eating, and I'm not a cook, and I wanted to call Laurie up to help me, but the reality is when I was buying a limited amount of food and eating the same amount of food every day, I found myself by day 3 or 4 craving Ben & Jerry more than I had ever in my life, and it made me much more compassionate to people on the food choices they have and the like. And so I want to just sum up by saying that we have to find ways of empowering this program to be more successful, because it's not at the level of success that we want right now. And in my city, we've been making a lot of very big policy initiatives to try to expand food options, to heal our very broken food system. And I'm very excited and thankful for the advances my team has made in everything from urban gardens to farmers markets to working with local bodegas to have better fruits and vegetables. And we can talk more about that.
This is great. I mean, you all speak with such passion about the projects that you have personally been involved in and really have embraced. And so now we're going to have a little more of an open discussion that I hope we can learn something about why you've picked some of these projects. You alluded a little bit to some of your interests, but talk more about what was appealing to the projects you've really invested your time and resources and interests in, and why you think these are so good.
Let me say, first of all, I think, and I assume that Cory and Scott will agree with this, look, there are problems out there we don't know the solutions to. There are literally diseases we have no idea what causes them really or how to cure them. Hunger and obesity is a solvable problem. So for me, I was drawn to this significantly because it is something I think we can fix we can really, bring close to an end if we have focus and attention. Now, perhaps there's that old Irish famine thing in the back of my head, who knows? But that was really one of the things. We can do this. The only thing that stopped us from doing it is the stereotypes that we've allowed to become ingrained and lack of focus. And I just wanted, one thing that really triggered when Cory was talking, we have stereotypes, all of us, who we think are on food stamps, who we think are on SNAP. In the council, one of the first things I did when I became speaker was work with a lot of the advocates in this room to expand green markets in low-income neighborhoods, and then to make sure those green markets had the resources to get the machinery, et cetera, to accept SNAP. We have seen the numbers skyrocket of folks using SNAP at those green markets, which is great for them, dynamite for farmers, really, really good. The farmers love this. Now, we then did an analysis, because somebody's gonna say, well, they're just buying cookies and pretzels, which is what I would be doing, by the way. Well, no. The vast majority, only less than 10% of SNAP purchases are for things that are not fruits, vegetables, or meat in the few places that have that. People are using it to buy exactly the quality, good products there. And that, rejecting aggressively those stereotypes, opens up a world of opportunity.
And that message is really not said often enough.
No.
And something that you had said before is the issue of ask the people what they want. Now, here's our program and bring it to you. Maybe you could...
Well, so clearly, we've got to get on the ground, and we've got to empower people to take control of their own health.
Right.
But I will tell you something, what's fascinating about the politics of food is that it kind of morphs into a question of land use and zoning. So in New York, we don't have a lot of land, but the sky's the limit. So rooftop gardens, right? Vegetable gardens that could be part of a staple. Imagine growing a vegetable garden near a public housing development so that people can share in that whole experience, bringing the food supply closer to New York City. We buy our apples in Washington State. We should be buying them in Washington County, and we should have real partnership with upstate and downstate in the inner city. And so part of this is land use and zoning. Part of this is a procurement issue. New York City buys a whole lot of food. The DOE and other things.
We are, we are the city of New York. This is a startling statistic. After the United States military, the city of New York is the largest institutional food purchaser in the world.
And that's why I told this to Chris this morning. That's why when I told him.
No. Well, we were having a conversation.
No, but Chris is right. So we have procurement, we have land use and zoning.
He told me
but no. You can tell we work together. But I'll tell you some of the problems that we have to also own up to, and never to criticize our mayor or city government. But look, we don't have people working on food procurement in the city. We need to have a commissioner of ag and markets. We've got to get into the food business, and we can do that. And Chris is going to get us there, but we need a food and markets commissioner. We need a land use and zoning operation to rezone so we can do this kind of gardening and rooftops. Vertical farming is not sci-fi. It's real, and we can champion this. So I like this policy work because it really gets to the gut of what local elected officials can accomplish through the charter mandated responsibilities we each share.
Excellent. And it sounds like this whole procurement issue is really a lot of the missing piece. I mean, what do you see in Newark, Cory, that's similar to that? Do you have procurement problems? How do you connect the dots here?
Well, after New York and the United States military and about 1,000 other, we come next in Newark.
Strong.
These guys really, they're really the ego. They just can't handle being in Newark's shadow like New York City is. It's tough. It's an inferiority complex. You obviously see evidence here. Look, we have all these issues in a smaller scale, which in many ways is our advantage, is that we can move quickly, we can make decisions that really change our entire food systems, and that gets me very excited. But the problem we have often is, and this is where I think is very important, is getting the data, is understanding what really is going on, which we're not studying right now.
Right.
Where are people using their food stamp dollars? We don't have that good structure. So we know in many ways what works, but we need to figure out in many ways how to take those islands of excellence and grow them to scale, and figure out also ways to make some tough calls. Like I don't, for example, think that we should be allowing SNAP dollars to go to large sugary drinks. This is obviously something that Mayor Bloomberg has brought to the fore, but we've got to be careful and make sure that people are, when we make decisions, and that we're not doing it in a sort of a patronizing way, saying you must buy X foods, and then we don't make those foods available.
Right.
So it's a real balance, and something that we in Newark think we could tackle. You know, we brought our first new supermarket in the central ward of our city's 5 wards in 20 years. We're about to bring another one next week. We're going to be doing at least 2 more. These are things you can do if you focus on them. And so what our hope is in Newark is that a lot of these innovations and changes that we're making, our school system is one of the big food purchasers in our city, that we can start focusing on locally sourced products. And I'll give you just one example. We're about to be the biggest urban gardening city in New Jersey. We've got a 2.5 acre site that we're about to do across the street from a grade school. We already have a 1 acre site. But think about this, it's a multiplier effect of benefit. So number one, we're using it for prisoner reentry programs, to actually guys coming home from prison, getting them jobs in the farms. We're using it for educational programs. The one we're doing right across from the school is really tremendous. We're creating thousands of pounds of food that now can take the place of those apples coming from Washington, that now can take place of vegetables that are coming from far away. So you're helping your environment. I could go on and on and on about the benefits of just having 3.5 acres of these 2 new sites in the city of Newark. And so these are the things that can be replicated in Camden, can be replicated in Trenton, because as you guys are going up, we have cities that have lost population, lost businesses, and we have tons of land that we could actually create sustainable and replicable food system models that can be replicated in other cities like we're seeing in Detroit and the like.
And I just want to make one point. You know, coining the term urban agriculture is arrived.
Yeah.
If we grab it, we will become a leader in this industry that will create jobs that are a gateway to the middle class. And I think that's something we have to focus on. And the other thing I want to just sort of focus everybody on is we also have to think about tax policy in this city. You know, we did a study, we did something called Food Stat. So we wanted to look at why there were so many unhealthy food choices in uptown Manhattan, Washington Heights, northern Manhattan. And what we found were there were 14 gas stations uptown, very few downtown. We had KFC, McDonald's, Burger King, every other block uptown. But yet somehow downtown there were a lot more healthy choices. Right. Then we started to look at why that was true. And would you be surprised to know that the city gives tax abatements, tax benefits to store owners, franchises that create jobs, flipper jobs, and we were subsidizing Burger King, McDonald's, KFC uptown. So they were opening up uptown. And we've got to rearrange our tax policy to say, no, we will reward the franchise that's putting healthy food options into communities. That's where our public dollars should go, not this blanket policy. And I think we can move the dial on that with a smart way of looking at some of these issues.
But you're right, and they've said it now twice. The zoning is not sexy, but that's where a lot of this policy actually gets to work. So we're finding when we start prioritizing in our zoning work, prioritizing where we're applying city incentives, we create real changes. And again, we start to address the other problems in Newark. We have a real stormwater issue. You know, and we have very little permeable land. And so when we start to zone these things, we can create not only healthy food benefits, but also deal with some of our other problems as well. And that's where the real work has to be done.
And it's interesting on the zoning stuff, which isn't sexy at all, but really important. It's doing the forward-looking stuff that Cory and Scott have mentioned. Right. But you also have to go back in. We have had to, in the city council, change things that are in the zoning code, which when they were written, there wasn't urban agriculture, are now actually would have been prohibitions. Right. So greenhouses on roofs that would be part of farms counted against you if you were a developer, the way the zoning code had been written in the 60s. So we needed to go in and affirmatively change that. So it's not sexy, and it needs to be really methodical, and you need to do a review just of old thinking and how that even could be holding us back nowadays.
So it sounds like from the policy point of view, it's tax laws and things that are really behind the scenes that people really don't think about in trying to put together programs.
Well, I think we've come to a very interesting place here. If you think what Mayor Booker's talking about in Newark and what we're trying to do in New York City, we're all at the same place. We recognize that real food policy is about digging a little deeper. Tax policy, land use issues. And again, going back to what I think we all agree is paramount, is if this becomes a top-down model for communities, people will not understand and embrace it. So one of the things that people always say is, why can't we get those bodegas to serve healthy ingredients and things? Right? It's always the bodegas. Yeah. Now, I grew up in Washington Heights. The bodega was my supermarket.
Right.
And it's the supermarket for hundreds of thousands of people. So the answer is not the bodega should do something. We should be greeting the bodegas and working with them. When we did our cookbook, the only bad review it got was from a City Limits reporter who trashed the book. I couldn't believe it. And I read the review, and she had a good point. She said she went into East Harlem and took a recipe and went to try to buy the ingredients in the community that this book talked about. And she couldn't find them.
That's interesting.
And she was right. Because, so how do we do this? Well, this is the fair market. The more we create a need for these ingredients, which is educating the community, the more people, bodegas and other supermarkets, will have those ingredients. That's why the Youth Bucks program is so critical. Because what we do is we give kids a $2 coupon, we take them to a farmer's market, they spend money at the farmer's market, right? And they go back to their parents and say, here's grapes, here's strawberries, I like this. And I know what my 13-month-old now, who will never have sugar according to my wife until he's 40, but it works. You teach kids what to eat and how to eat, and they enjoy it.
Let me give you the fact-based evidence for this. So we saw the same problem, that our bodegas, it was awful when we were going in them. We were seeing that they either didn't have fruits and vegetables, or they had fruits and vegetables that had brown that you wouldn't want to buy, and they did not look appetizing. So we created, this goes back to your point that you all are doing about creating the right incentives. We actually created a capital pool to give grants to bodegas to get refrigerated units and buy it. And so with the program, it's been incredibly successful. But my bodega on my corner, you know, I went there and they didn't get a grant. But now that they saw that the demand was there, they actually created fresh fruits and vegetables. And it's just amazing to see how the consciousness being raised within a community. And I love what Scott was saying earlier. When you do things in partnership with the community, when you listen to the community, you'll see that that demand is there and it cultivates from the grassroots up. You start to see the private sector moving to meet that demand.
So this is one of the great things about forums like this. So another reason to thank Laurie is, Cory, we need to get the name of your staff who figured out how to do that in Newark, because we've been trying to create a similar pool like that in New York City of capital for bodegas, but it's challenging because in our capital, the way it works, it's hard to give grants to individual small businesses like that. So we'd love to talk to your folks, because it's actually something we want to do, you know, when we could do it with the Borough President's capital money, the Council's capital money, but there's some legal challenges, and so we'd love to talk to your folks about that, and that could be really helpful, and we will call it never the Newark capital. We'll say we're going to call it the Newark capital grant.
Newark.
You know, one question I'd like to pose to all of you in terms of the cost issue, and we can debate forever, does it cost more to eat healthy? What about the issue of, in bodegas, there's no waste with frozen fruits and vegetables. It's better, it's access, it can be more economical, it lasts forever. When you take it home, there's no waste for the bodega. Do you think this is an option? We all want, as the first choice, fresh, unprocessed foods that are locally grown. Do you have any idea of a plan B or other things to include that have access with less waste and spoilage? Because, you know, 40% of food is spoiled and thrown away in America.
So part of the issue of food procurement, and I think we're so behind in this, we have got to figure out a regional food chain and understand where the points are for production and for supply. So, for example, it would probably not surprise us if we actually sat down and talked about this, that a Newark, Manhattan relationship between growers and people who have stores, that we could bring this supply closer to home, but we've never really done an inventory. Senator Gillibrand has done a really great job understanding how to create this food shed. We've met with the staff, Chris and I, that we should come up with an inventory, because that's when we can figure out, okay, how do we bring the food supply closer to home? And that's something I think is a legitimate discussion.
And let me give you an example. So we are in, or New York is in the Newark orbit. We are all part of the same metropolitan area, and the private sector is already doing it. We saw that food and services were coming into the third busiest port in the region, in the nation, excuse me, the Newark port, And then they would put them on trucks and drive these goods and services off in the food and warehouse them way down on exit 8A
Right.
on the turnpike. And then when it was time to get the things to market, they put them back on trucks, drive them back into Newark region and use our air freight, our highways, all that. And we just went to the people and said, this is ridiculous. So let me give you an example now. We are now having the biggest warehousing boom in Newark ever, creating thousands of jobs. But now they're using Newark as a point for food distribution.
Yeah, right.
The biggest warehouse for Wakefern for refrigerated goods servicing Boston to Baltimore is in Newark, New Jersey. And what I always do, and this is why I've almost gotten arrested in New York and Manhattan a few times, I've had to call, it's because if you go to a Starbucks in Manhattan and pick up anything from a cookie to the milk, I usually go in and I start yelling out, this is made in Newark, this is made in Newark. And that's where I get in trouble. But
I want to talk to you about this.
yes. but so if we could do that for the private sector, for Starbucks and the like, have a local point of distribution, we should be doing that more for our fruits and vegetables in a way that we're not doing.
And let me just give another, and Cory couldn't be more right about that. And just think of all that pollution going up and
Yes.
down the turnpike. I'll give you another example. You know, we spend, and it's good we do, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars a year for romaine lettuce for the salad bars in the New York City public schools, and that's going to go up, and that's a good thing. Now, we have farmers in New York State, and Scott's right, Senator Gillibrand's been awesome in this area, who grow romaine lettuce. But we buy that romaine lettuce for the Department of Education from California or Maryland, which is bad because they're not New Yorkers or New Jersey farmers. And this actually, but the New Jersey farmer thing is an issue because in law, local means New York. Right. So we do have to figure it out regionally because we should do local and then regional, which is a much better thing. But then also, in addition to them not being local farmers, it's being driven or flown here. Right. Why? Because we don't have the appropriate wash-cut bag facility, and we're working aggressively on this to try to get one going in the area where the Rockland romaine could come and be prepared to go into those salad bars, and then whatever other area needs wash-cut bag, a lot of good jobs. That's the kind of thing that in addition to the warehousing, which is central, we need to add in, and the idea of top, beginning to end food distribution so we can boost up local, which will help with the exact issue that you're talking about. But I want to mention one other thing. A couple of years ago, to their great credit, the Department of Education in New York City decided they were going to expand how much local food they bought. They bought, in that 1 year, about $5 million more in local food. They didn't spend $5 million more. They spent the same, but they made it a priority. And we have now charged every city agency to do the same. Don't spend more, make it a priority, do what DOE did, and we're beginning to see great results.
I think that's great. Make it a priority, which is, you know, part of what this conference is all about. And in the few minutes that we had, this is a great discussion. We could talk all morning, but we have to stay on a pretty tight time schedule. So in the closing minutes, maybe each of you could talk for a couple of minutes about what you would like to see in continuing policies developing. You've mentioned a lot of this, but just a little wrap of a snapshot of what you're looking for in moving forward and what policies you really think are implementable in the next year or so.
Well, I think we need to find ways to do more with zoning and land use policy. We need to find ways to hook all of the different city agencies up into one system where we really are, I think Scott said, food set, holding everybody accountable so we really don't lose our focus when this isn't in the headlines or whatever. 3, we have to find a way to use our procurement powers more aggressively to drive the market where we want it to go. 4, we have to implement all 59 recommendations of FoodWorks, and then everything will be immediately perfect. We also have to find a way to think more regionally and really embrace our power as New York, New Jersey, Connecticut together, because that really could change, I don't mean to sound kind of hyperbolic, the food perspective for the whole country if we could get the region to work together. And I really just want to emphasize not forgetting food as an economic engine. The best way to end hunger is to get folks jobs so they can buy food for their families. And that often gets lost in this discussion. But to sum it up, we need to be focused. We need to have goals and hold ourselves accountable to them. And we need to think comprehensively with any part of city government you think doesn't relate to food. It does. And we need to have them in our plan. And we really need to elevate and empower the food policy coordinator in the mayor's office to be a much stronger convener and person who holds agencies accountable.
Thank you. Well put, Howard.
So I would start out, and my hope is that we really could create a commissioner-level appointee with a staff to deal with the issue of food policy in the city for two reasons. One, it's the right thing to do for the reasons we outlined today. But two, it really is an economic necessity for the city. This will be a good deal for New York economically, as Chris and has talked about. The second thing I think we have to do is part of the strategy, going back to how we started the conversation. We have got to make sure that in our own bureaucracy, we don't lose sight of the fact that food initiatives locally are very fragile, very fragile. People who grow their own food, their own produce, farmers markets that do not have the benefit of Laurie, Tisch, and green carts, which is really changing the face of so many communities. I don't want to lose the mom and pop farmers market.
Right.
The community in the South Bronx that says we're going to grow our own produce. But here's the kicker. You get a farmer to come into that little plot of land, and the first thing that happens is NYPD gives the truck a $200 ticket and maybe tows the food, right? And then the Parks Department says, well, you didn't get the right permit, and then you go to the Parks Department, and they said, no, you've got to go to the Department of Health. And suddenly, to make $200 for the day, you've now spent $800 in penalties and fees. And part of what I think the strategy has to be here with our agency is we've got to nurture this bottom-up approach. It's not going to happen automatically. People are going to go into the food business, but we've got to help folks. And
That's right.
and the last part of this is a recognition that there's a lot of kids in this city that are not going to school, not because they're not the best and the brightest, because they've got the mojo and the attitude. Public school in the city, there's no kids that are better. There are kids who are sick. They're not getting the health. They're not healthy because they're not eating healthy.
Right.
And this is something that's frightening. And there's a lot of parents out there who love their children and are having trouble making ends meet. And the schools have got to play a much more laser beam focus on these children, and we've got to get to the houses. And lastly is I want to just say, one of the things I learned today is that New York City does think, and we do tend to think we have all the answers. Our programs are the best. You know, my cookbook was the best. What we did in East Harlem was the best. It's really not true. The way we combat this is from a regional perspective, and I'm really glad that I learned a little from Cory today, because what's happening in Newark is happening here. What Chris is doing and I'm doing is what he's doing, but yet you brought us together, so we're going to call him and say, hey, let's talk about refrigeration, let's talk about those warehouses, and that I think is a big benefit. Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
So first of all, I'm going to position my water, should I need it during my comments. Second of all, that Scott opened that door to advice and partnership. I want to recommend that he shaves his head. It is not only a good look, sir, but you can move around without less wind resistance.
You got to eat more food. I got to get you some more. That diet was...
Yes, I'm hoping we have an urban garden on my head. Use the space. My staff already wants to put a solar panel there. First of all the comments they said are right on point. It's extraordinary that we have leaders like this that are so plugged into the issues that really matter. And again, where people put their attention in public policy, often they're the things that relate in a very cynical way, things that relate to their reelection or to where the money is, to what have you. Here you have leaders that are concerned first and foremost about empowering people to succeed. And it's extraordinary to share a stage with two people I have so much respect for. And so I don't want to repeat anything they say. I just want to say quickly three things. One is we're all talking about local. And I'm so happy we have such great leaders from the federal government here. I would love to see a federal policy begin to do what I've seen a bit in education, to start to reward innovation, to incentivize innovation. Because right now, not giving localities the kind of flexibility to use the federal dollars that are coming in doesn't help. And again, the scale of a New York City, the scale of a Chicago, the scale of a Boston allows them to do a lot of things that smaller cities can't do. But if we had federal policy that was allowing us to be more flexible with dollars, creating the kind of grants, we could be doing a lot more innovation a lot more quickly. Number two, very quickly, is this challenge of measuring your success is so important. And this is sort of what hurts me. In fact, Bill Gates' letter, his annual letter, I think is always a great letter to read. This one starts all off with celebrating a little small mechanism that helped to measure the productivity of steam engines, and how that suddenly you now can figure out if you did these innovations, did it actually result in change? So in Newark right now, I'm so proud. Where's Elizabeth Reynoso? Where's Elizabeth? So we're one of 14 cities, only 14, only 14 cities have a food policy director. And we're able to do that because of really philanthropy and foundation support, that we have somebody that every day gets up and thinks about food systems. But we have a lot of activity going on in Newark, but I cannot sit here and tell you that my childhood obesity rates have gone down. Right. So much activity going in Newark. I can't sit here and tell you that my type 2 diabetes rates have gone down. And so we've got to really get good, and I think this is a space for foundations and others who have a lot of experience in measuring programs to begin to see that value invested here produces this result, so we can get a lot more sophisticated in our efforts. And the last thing I'll say to me is I deal with painful realities every single day. Chris was kind to say to me about our press conference we had about a brutal crime incident. And these are the things that capture our headlines. But I'm telling you right now, in Newark, the 88 murders I had last year, grievous, awful, painful. But the death and the destruction of lives that is going on every single day because of food issues is not captured in the headline, but is far more grievous in its impact on cities like mine. We need to figure out a way together collectively, because I'm talking to the choir here, to ignite the consciousness of our country, to focus our energy, our resources, our media, our demand to make changes here, to truly elevate the founding principles of our nation, this idea that our kids say liberty and justice for all. The justice issues that we're struggling with are really food justice issues here as a country, and we need to find a way to ignite the spirit of this nation to focus its energy on this, because as Chris said so eloquently in the beginning of this, when we as a nation focus our energies, when we put things center in the priority, in our priority perspective, things get solved, things get changed. We have the capacity to stop type 2 diabetes in its track. Michelle said that to me sitting in the second row earlier. We have the capacity to stop obesity problems, to stop food insecurity. These are things we could deal with. The only thing lacking right now is a focus, is a priority, is making this the demand of the grassroots of the larger population of the United States.
Well, thank you. That's well put.
Well done.
And one thing in closing is that sometimes the best medicine is at the end of your fork, and making this a priority is huge. And I would like you to join me in thanking our heavy hitters of food policy for their insights and information first. Thank you so much.